All right. First of all, we want to acknowledge and thank our sponsor of the evening, Sandy, and your family, that you're sponsoring tonight's Torah class in preparation for Chanukah in memory of your late and beloved husband, Robert Birnbaum, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, Natan Ben Michael Verivka Mato, whose yard site was this past week. Is that right? So Neshama Shavli, wish you and your family a beautiful day and a long life, and only nachas to come. Okay, so I'm very excited to share this idea to prepare for Chanukah, get in the right frame of mind for Chanukah coming up this coming week. And I was thinking, what's the best way I could introduce this idea? And I thought of a good one. Tonight, out of all the classes in your lived experience that you've ever gone to on Chanukah, I'm assuming you go to some kind of Chanukah class or hear Chanukah ideas on an annual basis at least. I think we're going to talk less about Chanukah than any other Chanukah class you've ever been to, but you're going to learn more about Chanukah this class than you'll ever have learned about Chanukah in any other class. Now that's a mysterious introduction, isn't it? Okay? So, but I really do think it's true, and I think we're going to build a structure or a new perspective on understanding the very special days of Chanukah and what they mean to us, but by looking at an angle that maybe we've never appreciated on Chanukah, but looking at some of the background, some of the connections that are right there staring us in the face, but we don't really notice it until we are shown. And I want to show you what I mean. So first of all, the title of the class, The Two Lights of Chanukah. Someone said, this is the laziest Chanukah ever. After 2 nights, you're done. Like, isn't it 8 lights? It means the two lights, the two building inwards and shining outwards. To understand that that if you look at what the Torah wants from the Jewish people, and a very, very broad strokes, we all know that there are 2 elements. Like when we mention both of these elements, they'll both sound very familiar to us. But what we might not appreciate enough is how opposing one is to the other. For example, I put together some of the sources that we'll see together. So if you look at a few of the psukim, so a few of the verses that we have right at the beginning on the first page, we have to quote the words of Bilam. Okay, he says, he peers upon the Jewish people, and he says, Hein am levadad yishkan uvagayim lo yitchashav. That this is a nation, referring to the Jewish people, that are going to dwell apart, away, separate from the world. And among the nations they shall not be counted. The Jewish people are being described in a way that we are apart from the world. And then, just a couple weeks ago, we had in the Torah the opposite, where Yaakov has his very iconic dream, and he sees the ladder that's Mutzav Arza, that's planted in the ground, and it goes all the way to Shemaima. And God tells Yaakov about us, about the Jewish people, that we will spread amongst the world. Ufarat the Yama, Vakema, Tzafona, Venegba, to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south, and there will be like the model for the entire world. That blessing will be channeled through us and permeate throughout the entire existence. That's what's being described by Hashem, by God to Yaakov. And the next one, I would say the most classic verse where we think of this concept about the Jewish people turning outward and creating a positive impact on the world, is from Navi Yeshaya in Perek Mem Tes. It says that we need to be, if you look at the second half of the verse, that we are supposed to be the light upon the nation. This is God talking to the Jewish people through the Navi Yeshaya, that the Jewish people will be the light upon the nation, that the salvation, all good things will come to planet Earth through the Jewish people. So here you have on one hand, we're being described by a prophet, a non-Jewish prophet, Bilam, that we're separate, apart from the world. Levadad yishkan, separate, don't have anything to do with the world around you. But on the other hand, we're being described as the Or Lagayim, the light upon the nation, not apart from the world, but very much a part of the world. And we can understand how these 2 values are very much in conflict with one another. Because if you want to have an impact on someone else, or something else, guess what else will happen? They will also have an impact on you. So if you want to go out there and change the world, you will change the world, but the world will also change you. So there goes that element of being separate from, apart from. that blessing or that prediction that we have from Bilam, that we're going to be apart from the world. Well, if we want to go and change the world and become the top of the industries and win awards and Nobel Prizes and create institutions that will really change the world, well, the world will also change us, and will sacrifice the uniqueness of who we are as an internal people. So who are we supposed to be? Are we supposed to be this nation which is out there in the world, or this nation which is hidden around in the shtettlach, in the shtiblach, working and making sure we are strong individuals, strong families, and strong communities? Just to make a point, okay, and I'm going to explain this in a very stark way. These two values, if you only take one and not the other, with an absolute extremity, so what do you get, right? If you only take the element of let's change the world, let's have tikkun ha'olam, right, and not talk about anything about tikkun ha'olam, what do you get? You say it so I don't have to. Right? Which element of Judaism talks exclusively about tikkun ha'olam? It's Reform Judaism, right? I would argue, I think that this might sound like a controversial statement, but really I think it's a descriptive statement. Reform Judaism, they don't have any value which is an exclusive value to Judaism. Really what they do is they take values of the world and they re-language them in the language of Torah value. But there's nothing that they have that if they close the door to the world around them, this is only ours. They believe in justice and equality, and those are universal values, and tikkun ha'olam, and those are all universal values that they also believe in. So they look at what's happening in the world and they say, oh, the Torah also has that. And in 1885 in Pittsburgh, when the original congregation gathering of Reform rabbis came in America, they basically said that we are going to accept only the parts of the Torah that are congruent with accepted morality at our time. AKA, the world is going to dictate what our values are and not vice versa. Tikkun ha'olam, when you take that to an exclusive extreme without that element of creating a unique internal nation, so what really you get is this obsession of tikkun ha'olam, changing the world, and ultimately the world is going to dictate what you believe to be true, which is exactly what happened, broad strokes, with Reform Judaism. If you take the other extreme, not to compare the two, but you take the other extreme and you only focus on your own internal building of your family or community, and you as an individual, what do you get to that extreme? Without thinking about how to impact the world, you get the old style Hasidic Judaism, where leave us alone in our shtetl, give us what we need. We'll have our own vocations that, like almost kibbutz style, we'll be self-sufficient, that we need, and we'll support our own community. We're not thinking to go out there and affect politics or affect industries. We just want to have enough that we could have a secure community and have our Torah, have our davening, have our schools, and have our own environment, which is pure and the most conducive for us to have our hisbodedus as a community, as individuals. So you see that Jewish history, Jewish present time, that it's relatively easy to have one of these two values in a vacuum. But the hardest thing is to try to fuse these two opposite values. How could we essentially fulfill the prophecy of Bilam and Yeshaya, and what Hashem told Yaakov directly the night that he had his dream with the ladder? How we have our cake and eat it too, being a nation which is completely apart from, and also a nation which is completely a part of the world, being able to know that we are nurturing our own internal values, spiritual health, but also taking all of that and affecting the world around us. So how is this all connected with Chanukah? I'm going to show you, but first we have to get a little bit distracted, and it's not going to be distraction, it's all going to come together in a very beautiful way. But I want to talk a moment about the Chag of Sukkot. Why do I want to talk about the Chag of Sukkot? If you know, the days of Sukkot, we know this when we daven Musaf. Every day our Musaf is a little different on Sukkot, because there's a different amount of parim in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, different amount of karbanos that were brought every day of Sukkot. The first day is 13, then 12, then 11, then 10, then 9, then 8, then 7. It goes down. Now, those 7 days, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, all total to 70. So in the totality of the days of Sukkot, we're bringing 70 different sacrifices in total. And then the day after Sukkot is a different Chag. What's it called? Shmini Atzeres. And on Shmini Atzeres, we bring only one. So go 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 1. And the Gemara in Sukkah, Masechah Sukkah, 55, Nun Heyam Abayz, tells us like this. Why does it go from essentially Sukkot representing 70 and then Shmini Atzeres 1? So the Gemara tells us very beautifully that Rabbi Lazar teaches that the 70 bulls, the 70 parim, are parallel to the 70 nations of the world, and it represents that they could come to the Beis HaMikdash. We're bringing karbanos on their behalf to atone any misgivings they had in their cultures, in their religion, in their nationhood. So we're essentially representing them in the house of Hashem. And then the single bull on Shmini Atzeres is parallel to the Jewish people, because we are levadad yishkon, we are single, and we are apart from the world. So on one hand, Sukkot itself seems to represent the energy that the Jewish people are there for all of planet Earth, a part of the world. And then we flip from Sukkot onto Shmini Atzeres, and we're now talking about all the nations of the world are kicked out of the banquet hall. Even the Medrash, Rashi brings this on Parshas Pinchas, that the entire Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres energy is like a big simcha, a wedding, and if you notice, like everyone comes for the chuppah, and anyone who you sent an invitation to comes for the chuppah and the shmor, because it's the best food of the evening. After the shmor, 20% of your friends leave, right? And then certain friends stay after the first dance, and then they have to leave. And then after the second dance, more friends will leave. And then towards the end, benching, it's really just family and best friends. After benching, family leave, and it's the chasam and kala by themselves. So all, as the night progresses, as the banquet, as the party progresses, fewer and fewer people are remaining, and whoever is remaining the longer is indicative of the relationship they have with the person throwing the party. And the Rashi on Parshas says it's the same thing. On Sukkot, the whole world is invited, 70 nations. Okay, it goes down every day. Nations leave, their carbon was taken care of, their sacrifice, their atonement was taken care of in the house of Hashem. So they leave, and the last day, who's left? Just the Jewish people. So it's that universal, a part of the world, down to our unique relationship that we have Hashem, that's Shmini Atzeres. Okay, so before we get to a very intriguing Chanukah connection, I saw this past year and it blew my mind. I want to share it because it fits into what we're talking about. When Avraham, Parshas Lech Lecha, when Avraham goes to approach Hashem to save the city of Sodom, okay, he approaches Hashem. He says, I want to save the city of Sodom, and he made bargaining. It sounds like Las Vegas. If there's 50, if there's 40, you're going to go bargaining Hashem down how many cities. But essentially, Avraham is approaching Hashem to try to save the city of Sodom. What is the words that he uses when he approaches Hashem? So the last source on this first page, Vayan Avraham vayomer hinei na ho'alti ladeber el Hashem. I'm going to now approach God. And it says, Va'anochi afar ve'efer. And he says, I am but I'm just like the dust and ashes. Afar ve'efer. And simply took. Avraham is just saying, like, who am I to ask you to change your divine plan? But nonetheless, I'm going to ask you anyways. That's a simple understanding. But the Vilna Gra explains something unbelievable. He says, look at the words, visually, look at the words, last source of the page, Afar ve'efer. The Gra says that it's Ayin, Par, Aleph, Par. Afar, and Efer is the same two letters, Pei Resh, which means the bulls, the cows that we bring on Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, right? That's not what Avram's referring to, but it's the same word. It's just what if you put an ayin at the beginning of Pei Resh, it's 70 par, 70, right? Or if you put an aleph, it's 1. So Avraham is essentially Al-Pi Sod, approaching Hashem. He says, Hashem, I know you want me to create this nation for you, Av Hamon Goyim, but you also want me to be the forebearer and the forefather of ethical monotheism in the world. So what do I have to do with Sodom? You're going to tell me focus on your child Yitzchak, focus on your family, build your legacy, don't worry about Sodom? Hashem, now Avram is saying, no, God, I am both Ayin Par and Aleph Par. I'm both the 70 universal part of the world, and I'm also that singular par, but don't tell me just to focus on Aleph Par. I'm approaching Sodom as Aleph Par and Ayin Par, but mainly from Ayin Par, Anochi Afar ve'efer. It's that he barges into the CEO's office. He barges into God's office and says, let's save the city of Sodom. Right? So related to that. Now, This will blow your mind. If you turn the page, the top source, it teaches us like this. We know that when we light the candles of Chanukah, the first night we light 1, the second night we light 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. Fundamentally, the Mishnah tells us it's really just, not the Mishnah, the Gemara tells us that it's ner ish lebeisa, ubeisa. It's just 1 candle per household, right? That's base level halachic observance. Then the Gemara says, what's mehadrin? Extra added layer of observance. It's ner l'chol echad ve'echad, within a household, not just 1 candle per household, but it's 1 candle per resident in the household. So you have mom, dad, 3 kids, 5 candles. Then you have mahadrin, mina mahadrin, what we like to call MRC. MRC? MRC, maximum religious compliance. Mahadrin, mina mahadrin, the absolute pinnacle of observance for Chanukah, which is it's a conversation for a different time, but it's what everyone does, and it's the only one that the Shulchan Aruch brings down. The Shulchan Aruch, Jewish Code of Law, always tells us base and then extra stringency. But here he only tells us this top layer of halachic observance, which is the first night you light 1 candle, second night you light 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? But the Gemara, in the same Gemara, tells us that that's only the opinion of Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says you go 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What are the reasons for Beis Hillel and the reasons for Beis Shammai? Anyone remember the reason for Beis Hillel? Ma'alin b'kodesh ve'ein moridin. You go up and you don't go down. It sounds so nice, by the way. What was Beis Shammai thinking? Why would Beis Shammai argue in such a beautiful reason? You go up in holiness, 1, 2, 3. Don't go down 8, 7, 6, 5. Right? What was Beis Shammai thinking? So Beis Shammai explains himself. He actually goes first. And Beit Shammai says, Keneged Harei Hachag. That just like, on the first side of the source sheet, just like when we brought the sacrifices, the karbanos, over Sukkot, we started with 12, we went to 11, we went down. So the way we light Chanukah menorah should parallel the way we brought the bull sacrifices on Sukkot. Does that make any sense to you? It should. What on earth is the connection between these two? Right? And I'll say furthermore, I think Beis Hillel is not disagreeing with the concept of Beis Shammai. He's just saying that it's more important that we go up in Kedusha, not down in Kedusha. But he doesn't argue. If I were Beis Hillel, I would have looked at Beis Shammai and says, why on earth would we want to copy when we're practicing Chanukah the way the Kohanim brought the karbanos in the base of Mikdash on Sukkot? That has no connection. So once I swipe Beis Shammai off the table, maybe then I would say maybe we should do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for a different. But he doesn't bother arguing on Beis Shammai's reason. He just presents a different value of going up and not down. But it seems like fundamentally he wouldn't disagree on the connection and the comparison between the two. But what on earth does Chanukah have to do with Sukkot? Have you ever seen the Seinfeld episode? What's it called? Festivus? Festivus? So I want to introduce you to the festival. Huh?
Airing the grievances.
Yes. They have metal pole or something? Is that genius? Okay. John knows exactly what I'm talking about. But I want to introduce you to a new chag you've never heard of, and it's called Chanukah. Okay? It's a season of Chanukah. What do I mean by this? Okay, if you've never seen this before, it'll knock your socks off. There's a Sefer HaMaccabi, which is not often studied. It's the closest thing we have to the Megillas Esther for the Purim story. Right? The chronology over here is Purim happens in between the first and second base of Mikdash as a direct outcome of the Purim story. Ezra and Nehemiah are able to get zoning and license to rebuild the second base of Mikdash. And the story of Chanukah takes place during the second base of Mikdash. So it's already been obsolete, too late to add anything to Tanakh. But we do have what's called the Sefer HaMaccabi. It's not so clear who wrote it and if everything's 100%, but it is quoted in the Aruch HaShulchan. It is quoted in other halachic classic sources. In particular, this section that I'm quoting to you is quoted in some very classic and reliable halachic sources. Okay? But the Sefer HaMaccabi, over here, in the second volume, in chapter 10, it tells us something really, really fascinating. Imagine being in that moment in history that the Jewish people, the Maccabees, defeated the enemy. right? That it was Rabim beyond Miatim, Miatim beyond Miatim, and it was a miraculous win on the battlefield. And it started, they had a little bit of oil that they found, and it lasted for 8 days. Everyone's going nuts. This is amazing. Hashem was on our side, like post 6 day war, feeling the fall of the Iranian regime, the Hezbollah beepers, like that kind of feeling all around the world, like this feeling of euphoria of wow, Hashem is really, really watching out for the Jewish people. What's it like? So it describes to us here what it was like for generation 1 of Chanukah, living through the Chanukah story. And let's look at it together. You could kind of allow your eyes to go with the English if that's what's more comfortable for you, but I'm going to read in Hebrew. It says, Vayichogu Chag LaHashem. So right after they realized that they had a miraculous win on the battlefield and the candles were burning for 8 days, so they celebrated for 8 days. Shmona Yamim Kimei Chag HaSukkos. How did they choose the number 8? So we think it's because the candle lasted for 8 days, which, by the way, there's like a very famous question. There was a book published around 15, 20 years ago of over 100 answers to this question. What's the question? The question is, why is Hanukkah 8 days? It should really just be 7, because the first day is not a miracle. They lit oil. The only miracle is the next 7 days, so it should be a 7-day miracle. So there's more than 100 answers. One of them, the Beis Yosef, says each day the oil only burned an eighth. So the first day was a miracle too, right? Many, many different answers. Another answer is that 7 days is for the miracle of the oil. The first day is the miracle of the war. The war was also miraculous. Okay, there's 1.5 million answers. But one of the answers that's given in the Aruch HaShulchan to this famous question is quoting this passage from the Sefer HaMakkabim. How do they choose 8 days? It wasn't because of the oil at all. We're not denying that the miracle of the oil took place, but that's not where the number 8 comes from. The reason why Chanukah is 8 days is because right away when they were victorious over the enemies, they said, let's have an 8-day celebration like the celebration of Sukkot. Okay. V'yizkaru, they all remembered as hayamim mikedem b'chagagam as chag hasukkos b'harim ba'aros. They remembered, right, the Rambam writes that this whole battle between the Yavanim and the Jewish people lasted for decades on end. They didn't have a chance. They couldn't celebrate any of the holidays. And they remembered for years, for decades perhaps, that they were trying to celebrate Sukkot, but they were hiding out in caves, in the mountains, in valleys, and they were just trying to find whatever they could grab hold of. They were living nomadically like the animals of the field. They weren't settled. They couldn't properly celebrate days like Sukkot. This is, by the way, right after the Chanukah story. They took Arvei Nachal and Kapos Tamarim. What's this a reference to? They took like a lulav and hadassim, right? The 4 species. V'yashiru shir shevach v'odal Hashem. And right after the Chanukah story came to an end, 25th of Kislev, they started taking their lulav and their esrog, whatever they could find, and they started singing Hallel to Hashem. Asher nasan lehem oz, that they gave them the courage, the b'nei osador. Okay, sorry, this got a little bit messed up. I'm sorry, I'm going to read it to the side. The b'nei osador, that generation that survived the Chanukah story, first called it the Chag HaSukkos Shel Chodesh Kislev. The first name of Chanukah wasn't Chanukah. It was the Chag HaSukkot that happened in Kislev. When is Sukkot? Sukkot isn't Tishrei, right? No, but this was the Kislev Sukkot. Later on in history, it got relabeled, I guess, to Chanukah. Chanukah. We rested on the 25th. That's what Chanukah stands for. And it also means that re-inauguration. Chanukah, the re-inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash. But generation 1 referred to these miracles as the Sukkot of Kislev, right? So if we could crack this code and understand what's really happening over here, all of a sudden Beit Shammai is sounding like he makes a lot of sense, right? This all happened before Beit Shammai. So if we can understand this, Beit Shammai is going to make a lot of sense that we should light the candles 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just like the celebration of Sukkot. Unless Beis Hillel has a better reason. He does. He overrides that with Ma'alim B'Kodesh Ve'in Moridin. But Beit Shammai is starting to make a lot of sense if the two are much more connected than we ever thought. Fine. So like this. So Chanukah, we know we have 2 miracles. Okay, we have the miracle of the candles lasting for 8 days, and we have the miracles of the battlefield. If you think about it, really the only thing that we should remember and care about is the thing that happened on the battlefield. Did it make any difference whatsoever that the candles lasted for 8 days instead of 1 day? Let's say the candles burnt out after 1 day. What would we have done? Nothing. I mean, we may have celebrated 8 days because 8 days like Sukkot. But they just wouldn't have the menorah burning, just like they didn't have the day before, until they got new oil. It was a 7-day travel back and forth to get new oil. So then they wouldn't have oil for 7 days. Okay, who cares? And they had pure oil. They don't even need pure oil because of a concept called tumah b'tzibur. That whole miracle of the oil was pragmatically complete bonus. It was extra, and it didn't make any difference for Jewish practice. Because if they had menorah for 8 days, if they didn't, God wouldn't punish the Jewish people for not lighting the menorah on day 2. If they didn't have oil, you can't do it. Just like we were locked out the day before, we couldn't access the Beis HaMikdash. We couldn't light the menorah, so we could only light the menorah if we could, if we have the menorah and we have the oil. So it wasn't a necessary miracle that the whole nace of the Pach Shemen was completely unnecessary. Right? You ever thought of that? It's very interesting. So we have these 2 miracles. The first miracle of the battlefield was very public. Everyone saw it. The world was talking about it. It was front page news. All the WhatsApp chats were buzzing around, right? The 6-day war, the Hezbollah, the beepers. It was the same thing. Everyone saw there was no way the Jewish people, the Maccabees, should have won that war, and we did. It was clearly divine. But the nace of the Pach Shemen, how many people do you think knew about it? Generation 1.
Only the Kohanim.
Only the Kohanim, exactly. There were, I would say, 50 people from planet Earth on year 1 that even knew that this miracle of 8 days took place. I'm not a Kohen, so I'm living in Jerusalem. I go to the Kotel, whatever. I'm standing on the top of the hotel? The Mamilla Hotel. I could see the menorah, not from there, but from my cousin's apartment in Yerushalayim. I could peer on Old City and see the menorah. I see day 3 of Chanukah, and the menorah is burning. I could peer in and see the menorah burning. I'm thinking they had enough oil for 8 days. Right? They found 8 Pach Shemens. I don't know that they found one unless you're in the Kohen group. 50 Kohanim, whoever was in there. There's 24 Mishmars of whoever was on staff that week over Hanukkah would know about the miracle. No one else knew about it. It was a completely private miracle. So we had one very public miracle for the world to see, and we had one tiny private miracle that was for us to enjoy internally. And then our job is Pirsume Nisa, a miracle that no one knows about. Now we have to tell the world about it. So for all generations, the world doesn't even know about the miracle of the war. And what do? We have in our homes, but outside of our homes ideally, and we tell the world about something that's happening in our inside world. No one knew about this miracle. It was a secret, right? But it was a secret that we had to spread to the world. Right? We take the little Chanukah, we put it outside our window or outside our property, so everyone could see the miracle that they missed. They saw the public one, but there was one happening inside. But the image, the duality of Chanukah, of these 2 miracles, are a perfect parallel to the 70 cows of Sukkot that the world could see. It's for the world to talk about, and then that par echad of Shmini Atzeres that was just for us. And our job on Sukkot is to tell the world that, hey, that miracle that you knew about, it wasn't because we were great. It's because we have this God on our side called Hashem. Look what he does in our own private living room that you didn't know about. That's what fuels, that's the battery to the things publicly that you saw. So we had an impact in the world, and we had something we were doing just for ourselves. And our job is to connect those 2 dots to understand that what happens, our ability to impact the world, is not coming of our own ingenuity, but it's coming from Hashem's divine presence in the Jewish people. Okay? Take a look at this. The Gemara in Shabbos 21a, Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, second last source of the second page, says about the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. V'chi Hashem le'orahu tzarech. God needs us to light a menorah in His sanctuary, like He needs light, right? She'iri lifnei b'layla, like hello kol 40 shana shehalchu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar. For 40 years we traveled in the desert. It was dark outside, and we had light because of God. He supplied the pillars of fire. So why do we need to supply light to Hashem? Ela hadlakas menorah eidos hi lebai olam sheshchina shar b'Yisrael. What the menorah represents is it's our ability to communicate to the world, hey, those amazing things that you see on the outside, it's because the Shekhinah is Shurei here, because God's presence is with us. That's how we're able to do those amazing things that you could see. It's because of what you can't see, what's happening in the Heichal, the Beis HaMikdash of this menorah. The Gemara points to the menorah as the symbol of that message, to be able to illuminate the outside world from inside the Beis HaMikdash. It's something unbelievable to notice that every year, the Chanukah falls out within the story of Yosef and the brothers. Yosef and the brothers is a protracted story. It starts Parshas Vayetzev, and then it goes Miketz, Vayigash, Vayechi. It goes on for 4 weeks. So it's either this week or next week, but it's always within the story of Yosef and their brothers. Rav Kook has a very beautiful idea that he says that if you think about Yaakov, right, he has 12 Shvatim. Some are called the Bnei Rachel, and some are called the Bnei Leah. Rachel and Leah each have one of their mates, Bilhah and Zilpah, but let's just look at it as two, Leah and Rachel. And the two of them, and in turn, their children, represent different modalities of the Jewish people. And he uses this tension to explain the entire debate that was very fierce and almost fatal between Yosef and the brothers that starts in this week's parsha. It starts the week of Chanukah for us this year. So how does he explain? He explains beautifully. He says in the Zohar, Kabbalistic literature, it says that Rachel is known as the Alma De'itgalia, Aramaic terminology. Alma, the world, De'itgalia, the revealed world of the Jewish people, what the world could see of the Jewish people. Okay, Rachel was very beautiful. She was buried al haderech, out in the open. Passerbyers could walk by. It's Kever Rachel. Leah represents the opposite modality, but the Zohar refers to as Alma De'itkasia, the hidden modality of the Jewish people. Leah is not described as beautiful in the Torah. Her eyes were rakot, were heavy, were sunken in, were cried in. She's not described as beautiful. And she's buried in Ma'aras HaMachpelah, which is a cave. Samoy min ha'ayin, covered underground, covered from the passerbyers. So Rachel represents this, what we would call a part of the world, the part of the part of the Jewish people that the world sees, that we're going out and changing the world. And Leah represents this element which is hidden, that we are unique and working on our own spiritual connection in our communities to Hashem, not being affected by the world around us. It's the world of Rachel and world of Leah. One of the key children of Rachel is Yosef. He's got these dreams that all the brothers of Leah, all the children of Leah, are surrounding him and bowing down to him, whether they're stars and moons, right, or they're sheaves of wheat. For us right now, it doesn't make a difference, but he's basically telling them, I had a dream that my worldview is going to dominate your world philosophy, your vision of what the Jewish people will be. And my worldview is that we've got to get out there and change the world and fix the world with the power of Torah, power of God on our side. We got to change the world. And you know what the brothers said? They didn't want to kill him. They said, you think you could do that? Let's give it a shot. And they sold him to Egypt. See what you got, boy. See if you can go. We don't think that's the right thing. We should stay here in Israel and work on our own communities and build infrastructure. You think we should go out there and change the world? Why don't you give it a try? And they sold him to the Egyptians. And much to their surprise, what happens? He rises with absolute success. And he saves the most powerful country because of his ingenuity and his wisdom. Who is right? Rachel or Leah? Turns out that story that happens towards the end of Sefer Bereshis, where the two worlds collide again and they make a resolve with one another, is the ultimate teaching that what Judaism is hein levadad yishkan, like Bilam said. We have to be apart from our own connection with Hashem, our own communities, our own families, our own individuals. He's boded us a deep connection to prayer, but we have to take all of that energy, and not for ourselves, but it's there for the world to communicate and to change and to affect and to do tikkun ha'olam, essentially. But through that divine connection that we have in the menorah, we got to go out and win those wars. And that's the connection in Chanukah itself, which happens in the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash was the very place that our battery to change the world emanated from the Beis HaMikdash, all the karbanos, all the avoda in Yerushalayim that we had. It emanated from there, and that's where our energy came from to change the world. And in that place, the only chag that we have, which is a celebration of the dedication or rededication of the Beis HaMikdash itself, we have these two miracles. One which everyone saw, one which not even the entirety of the Jewish people knew about until after the fact. And our job, to summarize Sukkot, every halachic element of Sukkot is Persumei Nisa. Publicize the miracle. It's got to be from your home, and you illuminate. Huh? What did I say? Chanukah. Thank you. Of Chanukah is Persumei Nisa. You push the light out. Don't hide it. It's happening in your home or right outside your home, but it's there for the world to see. Just like the original story of Chanukah, they called it the Sukkot of Chodesh Kislev. It's an unbelievable connection. Beis Shammai was plugging into that when he says we should light in accordance to how we light, in accordance to how they brought the karbanas. It's something which is unbelievable, which you find when it comes to Bnei Rachel and Bnei Leah. Many, if not all, truly pivotal moments in Jewish history that we know about in Tanakh, you'll find a dynamic duo. And that dynamic duo, more often than not, you guessed it, you're gonna have one representative from the children of Rachel and another representative of the children of Leah. The first that comes to mind, Moshe takes the Jewish people to the border, to the Jordan River, and then he hands it over to Yoshua. So Moshe is from Shevet Levi. Who's Levi from? Levi's from Leah. Okay, hands it over to Yoshua. Yoshua is from Shevet Ephraim. Ephraim is one of the two children of Yosef, so ultimately he comes from Rachel. So the Jewish people being created into a nation that ends up getting into our land is this dynamic duo. Yoshua was being Mishamesh Moshe for all those years. He was the Batman and Robin, and then when Moshe passed away at 120, Yoshua took the mantle over, and that duo that took the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim through the 40 years of desert and ultimately into Eretz Yisrael. It was half from Rachel, half to Leah. Again, connoting or describing that these two elements, which are so opposing one another, but we'd have to find a way to make them both work. Ultimately, when the Jewish people will build our first sense of our own king, our own monarchy, the first king was the king of, who's the first king? Shaul, who came from Binyamin. Binyamin is one of the children of Rachel. Go change the world, be out there. And then, very quickly, because of a mistake that Shaul made, it got switched to the Davidic dynasty. Okay? Who was David? Where was David from? David was from Yehuda. Yehuda's from Leah. So the first two kings also represent this duality, these two modalities of the Jewish people of outward-facing and inward-facing. It's very interesting. You could even add to this idea that when it comes to Shaul and David, Shaul is described in Tanakh. Again, Shaul comes from the world of Rachel. Shaul comes from Binyamin. Binyamin comes from Rachel. Out in the world, so Shaul is described as Mishkavo Umala Gavoa Mikol Ha'am. He was a striking individual. He was tall. He was big, and he was someone you saw him and you got the sense of awe from him. Again, changing the world, being there as like a model to the world. David, when the Navi Shmuel came to the home of David, they went through all the children of Yishai and they didn't even bother showing David. He's like out in the field working the animals. Like he wasn't even in the conversation. And David ultimately was from the world of Leah, again, the world of the Olam the Iskastia, the hidden world. And you could see David and Shaul kind of representing these two modalities of being there to change the world, the model to the world, and just like worrying about our own needs, internal, because the more you're out in the world, the less you're there for yourself. But we got to have our cake and eat it too. And that's essentially what these two prophecies of being Or L'Goyim and Levada Yishkon, two different Navis, they both said that about the Jewish people, and we have to be able to define both at the very same time. You know, there's this concept that we're waiting for Mashiach, right? So we know about Mashiach ben David, right? But there's also Mashiach ben Yosef, who's going to come before Mashiach ben David. It's very hard to understand exactly what that means, but again, a very iconic moment in Jewish history, but it's in the future. Right? We know about it from Nevuah, and you have this duality of who Mashiach is. Is it Mashiach ben Yosef? Yosef obviously comes from Rachel. Mashiach ben David. David comes from Yehuda, and Yehuda comes from Leah. So you have, even in future times, when we're being described a pivotal moment in Jewish history, you have a dynamic duo again, the two Mashiachs, and they both each come from each one of these modalities. The one added element I thought of earlier today to maybe take this one step further but it might be too far. You can be the judge. Is Chanukah, background, step one, astrology, we believe is 100% legit. We just believe that we don't really know how to practice it anymore. Look to the back of the paper, and it says, oh, because you're Aries today, you'll get a raise at your job, right? That's babkas, obviously. But there has been volumes upon volumes of Talmudic literature from the Rishonim. Ibn Ezra wrote like 12 volumes on astrology. It's like very much something which we believe is very real in Judaism and our values, but we just don't really know. It's kind of a lost art, okay? Chanukah is the only holiday in our annual cycle which spans two different astrological signs. Right. It starts off in Keshet, which is the arrow, bow and arrow, which they would call in the newspaper Sagittarius. Right. Okay? Any Sagittarius over here? No. I heard you guys are evil. I'm just joking. Okay. And by the time you finish Chanukah, you're already in the month which is dominant of the Gedi, which is Capricorn. Which, okay, Keshet is an arrow, and a Gedi is a goat. Okay? So connecting to this idea, again, I just thought of this today, but a Keshet is you shoot it out. Right? Shoot it out. A Gedi is the animal which is more often than any other animal brought in our Beis HaMikdash for a korban. That's us working internally. So in the energies of Chanukah itself, whatever this means, you have, again, every other Chag, right? Sukkot, Pesach, Purim is only one day, Shavuos, it's all within one dominant astrological sign. Chanukah is the only one that goes from Kislev to Teves, and therefore it's defined by both. And again, each of those signs, I think, broad strokes, you can interpret B'nai Rachel, B'nai Leah, these two miracles, one in the Heichal that only a handful of people, a couple dozen people knew about, and one the entire world saw, everyone who was watching saw. And again, this is the two energies of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, and they're very intimately connected, so much so that intuitively, generation one of Chanukah knew that right when we finally won the war of Chanukah, they didn't go and eat a matzah, even though they haven't eaten matzahs in 3 years, 5 years, 10, 20 years, since they were able to practice that, but they knew intuitively that they needed to start making up for lost time of Sukkot, because what they celebrated on the days of Chanukah was the exact same celebration of what it means to be a Jew, the duality of what it means to be a Jew, realize how fundamentally opposing these two energies are, but it was a celebration that we have to be able to do our very best to fulfill both the prophecies, to win on the battlefield, but not say, hey guys, world, look at our strategies, look at our ingenuity, look at our Iron Dome and our intelligence, but no, you go back and say all of that was because of this little miracle that only we saw inside the Jewish people. The oil lasting for 8 days is because the Shechina Shruya B'tochenu, is because we have Hashem on our side. That's how we're able to, that's the battery, literally the battery, the animation, the life force of how we're able to have the courage and results of going into the world and winning Nobel Prizes and winning wars on the global stage with zero, next to no friends. And all of that is not coming in a vacuum because we're so good at doing what the world could do. It's all coming because Yaakov is married to two people, Rachel and Leah, and he's married to both. And our brothers, B'nai Yaakov, B'nai Leah, were represented by both. Ultimately, we're B'nai Yaakov, B'nai Yisrael, and that has both those energies of being Or L'Goyim, being deeply, deeply a part of the world, but we're only able to do that because we're also the B'nai Leah, that we are apart from the world, completely separate from the world. And it's that separation that gives us the ability to cross over and have a deeply profound effect on the world around us. And I think to walk into Chanukah, think in our own lives, what am I doing for myself, for my own growth in Yiddishkeit, for me as an individual, for me as a family, as a community, and how are we taking all that energy of that little miracle that happens inside, how we're being mefarseim that nace to the world, what can we do to be able to advocate and find a little problem in the world around us, whether it's an individual or on a larger scale, whatever our capabilities are, and making sure we're taking all our energies and heights of spirituality and making sure we have the right approach to go out there and make the world the very best that it could be.
Thank you.